Welcome to this latest Grant Thornton Roundtable session. I'm Chris, Chairman of Grant Thornton here in Thailand. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Tanva, by Andrew, by Ashish, who are all experts in their field. And between us, we have a reasonably substantial knowledge of businesses at all stages of their life cycle, from startup to mature industries, from privately owned, all the way through to public companies. And we've also lived through many cycles of the business economic cycle, boom times, bust times, and tough times. And as we look forward today, we see that it's going to be a challenging economy for Thailand and globally. There are a lot of headwinds locally, whether it's local politics, whether it's on the international side, tariffs. There's a lot of headwinds in front of businesses today. And I want to explore with my colleagues how businesses can best set themselves up to be successful during this headwind time, and how we as Grant Thornton can become business friends, sounding boards and partners for your business in helping you be successful and sustainable during these tougher times ahead. So let me turn to my colleagues and really start the ball rolling. Tougher times, Ashish. What does that mean inside a business? Do we see higher levels of risks as a consequence?
Indeed, Chris. So, whenever you are facing economic uncertainties, you will see the level of frauds going up. Uh, and it sits very fabulously with the fraud triangle, if I can say. First is a pressure to perform. It can come down from a revenue stream, to the extent of fake billing. Then you have incentive. Incentive is obviously you're achieving numbers there, right? And once you have both of these fit into the, ticking the box, then the third one, which is rationalization. And rationalization, you can put it, once the business, you are delivering as a business leader that you're doing the numbers in whatso manner it is, you are able to rationalize this. You are giving a reason to the management that yes, this is all is happening. Obviously, it takes the cost of this comes heavy when the way we say it, the coffins comes out of the closets. You know that you have billed, but you have not been able to receive the money. That's where it starts to become bad.
Okay, and Tanva, going across to your side, and you obviously, as a lawyer and someone who specializes in tax, you've seen a lot of businesses struggling during tougher times. What were the key lessons you've seen and learned from that you would advise our clients to take on board? How are they going to prepare themselves for tougher times ahead?
So there's a few elements, right? If we look at the tax perspective or the legal perspective. So if we look at in terms of the tougher times, sometimes there is this, obviously, in an environment where businesses are doing badly, there's pressure on spending from the government. The government revenue, as we can see, is not growing as it should be, right? Governments have to spend more to stimulate the economy. But on the other hand, businesses are not paying as much tax because they're not being profitable. So you see a lot more, there's a lot more ways of government trying to claw back as well. So in effect, businesses have to be prepared to face challenges from all angles. One, sometimes from the government and regulations, tax audits to claw back funds. And then, as Ashish mentioned, there are more instances of fraud or crimes or irregular things happening in the economy as times are tougher. And then regulations comes down to the business a bit more, and the entire environment becomes more difficult. I would say that, in preparation for tough times, effectively you have to start prior to economic downturns, when times are good, when you have the capacity, you have the finances to invest into compliance, into how to get, effectively good business practices. It is not something that, a lot of, especially startups or smaller companies might feel this is something for large MNCs. Not really me. I'm focusing on growing the business. But when times are tough, if you're looking for funding, right, you might not be able to do it because you don't have the underlying transparency. Like investors coming to take a look at your business, okay, we'll put in the funds to pull you through these tough times. They might be reluctant because they look at your accounts, they look at how you operate your business, and it's not something that they feel comfortable investing into. So you have to prepare these ahead of time. Now, in tough times, there is also a pressure to let go of staff and employees. And you see a lot in the news, factories shutting down, letting employees go. They don't even have money to pay the severance, right? In challenges like that, corporate culture is very important. It's not just law. How have you developed and treat your employees to give them that perceived fairness and that perceived culture that they can approach management and management of them with the employees are together in this enterprise? That goodwill that you created is very important to draw down during tough times, because then you can negotiate with them. The company is facing tough issues. Do we just let you go and fight it out in court to see whether I can pay you or not? How much can I get away with paying you? As little as possible. Or are the employees willing to dig down and also help the company? And that's something that you invest, right, in culture. It comes back down to the entire nature of how you conduct your business, how you govern your business, how you approach operating your business.
And I think we have plenty of examples like Tanva mentioned about, when you have an organization which is growing, it's a startup. Even if you are able to succeed with Series A or Series B, Series C doesn't come through because the businesses are already, feeling the brunt of the practices, or let's say no practices at all, and they see the entrepreneur, the founder of the business conducting himself in a particular manner, and they feel that it's an acceptable behavior, right? That's how they do it. And then, these kind of businesses, and we have plenty of examples, they don't survive, they don't last very long. They fail to create the value with, and that's with the purpose which we have come to the market, that seriously doesn't, go along.
So systems and processes and ways of working actually reinforce.
And should be at the beginning level rather than, you're thinking about it when you are already big.
Okay. I'd just like to bring Andrew in here because Andrew, obviously, technology, AI is forefront of what you do, systems and processes. How have you seen systems and processes support entrepreneurial businesses? Quite often you hear people say, I don't need all these formal processes because I'm an entrepreneur, I run all this hands-on every day. How have you seen process and solution brought together to help entrepreneurs be more successful in a sustainable manner?
So if any business, had the sort of the Harry Potter magic wand of starting their business again, completely starting it from scratch today, with everything that we know today, with all the processes that we have today, with all the contemporary technology we have today, not a single one would put it back together in exactly the same way as they have it now. I mean, I just can't imagine how much they would change, up in the high 90%, I would imagine. So, because really you want to have every single one of your processes acting as a strategic lever for your business. Every one of those things should be giving you deep insight about your customers, about your products, your suppliers. We spend so much of our time in business, and accountants are somewhat guilty of this, where we're looking backwards. We spend a lot of our time looking backwards about the sort of historical information in our company, and we try to gauge the future based on what happened a year ago. But we need our systems to be basically like this giant radar out ahead. So if you could do that, if you could put your business processes back together again, you would put them together as strategic levers for the business. I was doing an AI presentation the other day, and there was an entrepreneur in the audience, and they said that they're actually creating a new company now, and they described this set of systems and interlock systems dealing with ecosystem basing on AI and individualized, personas. And I mean, they were just with very few people involved in this entire process. That's how they're putting their business together. Now, can you imagine if you have your business set up like that, where it's all kind of in the process, in the systems, institutionalized, built for scale out of the box, you're set. I mean, you're going to have challenging times. We're in very challenging times, and maybe more to come. But if you have that behind you, if you've got that, that's your you can rely on, consider the strength there. But if you're if your processes are not strategic levers for your business and you're relying too much on manual processes and blah 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 blah, and then if you try and change a process, it looks like you're trying to change the human, so you get resistance, and that's just not a place you want to be. So we need to be animating all of our processes with digital to make sure that they are giving us insight, and basically allowing us to look far into the future using all the contemporary technology we have available to us today.
Okay, and I fully support that. I mean, I think people often see systems and processes as an interference in an entrepreneurial organization, where actually they're a backbone that enables an entrepreneur to go and be entrepreneurial, knowing that the systems and processes are working and the goalkeepers in place to make sure the business runs smoothly. Tanva, you introduced the topic of culture, which I know is a big one amongst us when we're chatting in the office, etc. Cultural tone from the top. How important is it from your perspective, and how do you set best practice?
I think effectively, the leaders lead the mood and tone, and in terms of champion the behaviors, right, of how they want the people in the organization to abide by or to behave. Simple examples: if the leader is stealing money, then the followers will also steal because it's okay, right? But more than that, I think setting culture requires the business or the leaders' management to really identify, all the stakeholders involved in their organization. The business does not exist in a vacuum. You have employees, you have co-owners, right? Investors or co-shareholdings. You have the management. You have your customers, so people outside the organization that are somehow affected through your activities, your direct customers or clients, or even people in the community, right? So when you set the culture, you have to understand what type of relationship do you want with all these stakeholders and all these people. And it's not something that it's an ideal that an ethics, something that you would say, well, business is about making money, and morals and ethics is a good thing to have, but not necessary. I think it is very necessary, partially because we live in a legal environment as well. So at the first step, you need to at least comply with the law, and the law does not exist out of context of what is public morale or what is fair to everyone, right? So at least you have to set that standard. You have to make sure that your people are compliant from the regulatory perspective, because otherwise everybody might suffer. The management might be co-liable, the company might be co-liable, that employee whom you have condoned such practices might ruin their own lives, and it might affect the greater community, your customers and everyone. At least that's the first layer. The second layer that you build is in terms of what is nice to have beyond what the law says, right? The law doesn't require you to be nice to each other, but it probably is a much better place to be nice to each other. And that builds your goodwill, which is effectively your piggy bank. In good times, you save money for hard times. You need to have finances to muscle through the hard times. You also need a goodwill, the soft skills, because when times are tough, people might not stay with you. And what is that thin sliver that makes them stay with you, right? It's the culture. It's that goodwill that you've built throughout the years, and now you're drawing down during times are tough. You might not be able to match the best salaries because you're a smaller organization. You can't match the large organizations. You don't have the financial muscle power to beat your competitors that are much larger. But you can have a strong goodwill, right? And that's within the reach of the leaders to equalize effectively against other competitors that might have other advantages. So I would say that culture is not something that's a good to have. You have to think that it's a strategic weapon in your arsenal, right? In your arsenal to really move your business forward or your organization forward. And it's a tool that you could use right? In terms of formulating tactics and strategy to meet whatever challenges that you have.
And tone from the top, from the senior board, etc. How does that influence? Is that direct or is it indirect?
I would say both as well. Obviously, you need something to have a sounding board. You just can't have one leader or one man, a small group of manager trying to build the culture. So there must be some indirect method of creating the echo chamber, right? So that everybody will behave accordingly. But obviously, it's also a direct matter. How you behave yourself, the example that you set for your staff. If you are constantly late for work, then obviously your staff would be late for work. If you find that, if you come to work and you see something that's wrong and you just say that, well, I'll just overlook that because it's too much of a trouble to fix it, then your managers, your supervisors will do the same thing. And that effectively, ricochets into the broader. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, you are, as management, you're on a pedestal, but that's the position that you have. And you have to set that example. But if you do it right, then you will effectively create a very strong organization.
Good point, Kundan. And one of the practical examples, Chris, which I have seen, we were engaged in a investigation where we were talking about undisclosed related party transactions of founder, co-founder, let me say like that. And you have board also there, and pretty reputed board which was there on that company, and non-executive board members or one of the executive board members, I don't remember exactly what the title was, but that person has recommended his wife, information technology company as to be the vendor for the sole service provider, right? Now, we weren't investigating that particular transaction, but imagine that tone which the executive board member or the non-executive board member had said, here's my wife, that's the company, you're going to purchase only with this vendor. Now, how can that board not approve any undisclosed related party transaction of that co-founder or founder, right? So he lost that. So he lost that tone itself because, like I said, it would become an acceptable behavior that if he had done so, I might as well be allowed to do, have a related party transaction and not disclosing it.
Again, to both of these points as well, that all the processes and systems that you have in place, if you walked into an organization and every system process was kind of opaque, and you're kind of sensing the culture already as soon as you walk into that organization. But if you have walk into an organization where everything is transparent, and these systems and processes are very good at making these things transparent, so that sort of echoes the culture as well. So that even if the CEO, for example, who is a nice person and is not stealing money from the company, but if their processes and systems are not set up in a way which is going to just allow transparency and let light shine through, it's just a whole different ball game. You can't rely on every single person thinking, oh, he's a nice guy, so that means I'm going to be a nice guy. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So it sort of has to line up. You have to have the systems and the processes in place. They should be sort of innocuous, of course. They should be supportive. But you as an employee would know this is an organization which is open, transparent, that values honesty in all of our transactions. In that particular case that you were talking about, Ashish, then the policies would have said you're not allowed to engage in people who you're in. We know this very well working for our company. It's so those things have to be supportive of that environment as well. And again, back to the original point, if they were in place, everything should just then take care of it's got its own strength, its own core. Its core is already strong as you sort of go into these turbulent headwinds that we're in now.
I think it also comes back to, what kind of future do you want the company to have? Because let's say you build a company and you start having related party transactions that are not transparent at the management level, that stifles your ability to grow effectively. One day, if you say, I'm growing to a point, I'm having astronomical growth in my business. I need more funds. I need to raise capital. I want investors to come in. And they see this transactions, it will come up when they do a due diligence. And I bet you they will step back and say, well, how do I know that the funds of the company are not being siphoned off by the management? Or if you decide to go public and get listed, those will be red flags, right? You might not be able to do it if it's too messy. So you're almost shooting yourself in the foot, right? You're sacrificing the short-term gain, right, for that long-term goal, right? That you are limiting your ability to grow. And even if you say that, well, I don't want to exit, I don't want to list my company, I'll never need foreign external funding, I'm wealthy enough. The question is succession. When you have succession, either you sell it. If your children are not going to succeed, you can't sell it for a price that is commensurate with what your business is worth because of the perceived lack of transparency, the unknown risk. Or if you're handing over to your children, then you might, as lawyers, we've seen it, disputes within the family because people are dipping their hands into the common pot, right? And when you let go of it, what are the rules of the games between the successors? So these things are created through years of culture. And once you start going down that route, it becomes more difficult to unwind it.
Yeah, and I think the one I would add to those, all very, very good points, is actually about clear communication from the top. And communication, of course, is two-way. You also have to listen to what people are saying back to you and feed it back. But honest communication, I've always found, is the way to start to build trust, and that then builds your goodwill, and then you get your culture, or you start to form the culture which you want to project through your organization as something that differentiates you from a competitor. But I just want to come back really into leadership tone from the top. I mean, quite often, Ashish, you're dealing with some very gritty matters. How often is it that it's because people haven't acted early enough and put in the processes versus, and then something starts to build up over time versus someone actually physically coming in and say, I'm going to come in and steal from this company? How do you see it evolving?
I think there are both the scenarios, Chris, in this. It all depends on the intent of the management or of the board. What is the long-term objective? Do you want to learn from your mistakes, or you want to just act on this one and carry business as usual the way you have been doing with the next? It doesn't happen that way, right? So most of the times what we have seen, and at least in a region like ours, there's no preventive strategy. There's always a reactive strategy. People only act once it has happened. You've burned your hands, you've burned $1 million, and then you're thinking, oh, that's something which has happened wrong. You investigate that case, you try to bring that learnings, but you don't, you kind of lose the essence of why we are, introducing certain new, let's say, rules, principles, embedding few things in the policies, etc., etc. And then it becomes business as usual for any, let's say, internal auditor or even for an external auditor, and then they tend to forget it. The thing lies in what your objective is. Do you want to make it robust enough that it doesn't happen in future? There are certain organizations, and I love to work with those organizations where they take the learnings and then they try to make sure that it is never repeated. But there are some which just do a tick in the box approach, and they see instances of it more often, and especially when you don't adopt technological solutions like the way Andrew was saying. If you don't inculcate that into your behaviors from a technology standpoint, also that becomes very critical.
So, just sort of taking a slightly different tack now. I mean, all of us are involved in a lot of client work, and as I said in the opening, businesses of all size, different industries, different ownership structures, etc. One thing that I've always noticed in common, though, is that actually for a lot of CEOs, when the going gets tough, it can get quite a lonely position up there. How can Grant Thornton help? I mean, I know we're keen to position ourselves as a friend to business, someone that clients can come and talk to, bounce ideas off. How are you seeing that work in practice? How are we going about making ourselves more available to our client base?
I can talk, I mean, just from a technology perspective, just focusing on the technology, is that I very often giving workshops to business people, and I bring up the subject that, for example, if you take something like digital transformation, which is sort of slightly hackneyed term now, that, you know, it had the word digital in it, so they said, "Oh, let's give it to the IT or the CIO and you can see everybody in the audience is starting to, they know about what I'm about to say, which is as soon as it went to the CIO and became an IT project, it was a slow burn to doom, basically, because not that there's anything wrong with the CIO, but they've got 1,000 million things on. Every one of them is a burning platform. By the time they get to your thing, it's number 455 in the queue. The world has changed significantly in that time. But what every technology is, it's a business problem. You have to, first of all, you have to anchor yourself at the business. And again, in the workshop, when I discuss this and I talk about the fact that it's got to be business first, and you've got to speak in the language of business, you've got to understand the business opportunity or the business challenge. It is absolutely amazing how very few tech companies can have a business discussion. And then eventually they'll translate that into technology. They will very typically have a technology discussion, and the person in the business is speaking business. They're not speaking the same language. There's this disconnect, and it even happens inside the companies as well. So it's absolutely fundamentally important that this gets anchored into the business context in the very first place. Technology is later, and price comes even later on too, because you don't mind spending $1 if you're going to get $5 back. But if you've never actually asked the question about, I'm going to get $5, then you just want something free, and we know what happens often with free. So it's really, really important, and it happens so often. It's extremely common that these technology, any sort of technology, is mismatched because it doesn't actually fit the business context itself tightly enough.
Okay, so then going back to the client basis, the businesses that are out there, some we know, many we don't know, thousands and thousands we don't know. How would you react if any of them rang you up and said, I want to come in and talk about my business. I want to share my problems with you. How do we react as Grant Thornton?
I think, Charlie, from our perspective, we get that all the time. A lot of our existing clients become sort of colleagues and friends. So I do get clients ringing me up for questions off the bat. And it's not as if we work on the clock and we start charging them immediately. So I would say, for us, it's nice. We would love to learn about businesses. It gives us new ideas, more experiences. Obviously, whether the client uses us or not, or sometimes we have clients that we say, you might be better off served finding someone else who are more appropriate, or you could actually resolve this quite quickly internally. And using external resources, a lot of times you have to address several issues. It's one, if you don't have the internal resource to do it or the know-how internally, then you think about when do you need to get this done. Then finally, you set a budget around it. And a lot of times what we have for clients, I have clients that I told them, for certain things, the heavy lifting, you can do it because it'll be too expensive for us to do it. We can guide and advise you. And once you have the roadmap, you can work on it yourself. So we work on a budget for it. Because we understand all businesses from startup to various stages of maturity have different constraints. And a lot of times I think we have a lot of events that we invite clients to, and actually get sharing from various industries and various business leaders as well. So for example, client luncheons are not solely restricted to clients, but also friends of the firm. And you participating in that, I learned a lot from the various business leaders. And I'm sure clients learn more from each other than simply just from us, our expertise in various of our fields. So I think for management, opening up the network, getting contact with various advisors, having that personal relationship ultimately would pay out, and allow them to have this sounding board when they have questions, or when they have issues that they're trying to figure out how should they approach it.
Okay, and then maybe if I can point this one at Andrew. I mean, say a client comes to you, Andrew, someone you've known for a long time, you've done a lot of work on the technology front with them and processes, etc. And they come to you and say, I need some advice on internal audit or on a particular type of tax to do with exports or something like that, not your area of expertise. How do you work with the client at that point?
I mean, for me, and standard practice for us is that, I mean, the relationship. So I have the relationship with that client. So I know that client. I know their business. I know them well. They are, at some point, I like what Tanva said there. It's not our professional relationships merge into sort of, I would say, professional friendships. I mean, the people that I work with, I've known for years, decades here. We know their business. They know they know us. They trust us. That's a very important thing as well. That trust is too. So we're responsible for that relationship. So we would go and find the right expert for that, but then not just sort of abandon the client off, but make sure that we handle that very carefully. Make sure that it's positioned. So we'd have to also explain to our colleague all the background about that business, because it's another kind of terrible thing if you just say, okay, well, we'll get somebody to call you, and they come along and they start asking you questions that you've known for 5 years or 10 years. I mean, that would just be an awful situation. So whoever's owning that relationship is carrying that it's a gift in a way, but they're carrying it very carefully. So they're making sure that they brief the colleague, making sure that they are part of that discussion when the colleague comes to the client as well, so that they can anchor it into the wider business context too. Because that client will come back to you in another 6 months' time with another question about something else. Because this is the nature of all businesses, is that they're complex and they require all these things, and it's national, it's international, and it's changing, and it's so it's a very, very, these are all long-term relationships that we have.
I think I agree to both on their perspective, and I think we should be seen as trusted advisors rather than that the moment you ask me question, my billing starts. That's not the way we should work. It is about taking care of that relationship so that they are being handled well. And it doesn't stop with passing the reference. You have to follow up with that colleague also, did you address the point which the client was asking? That's one. And then making sure that you go back to that client or connect of yours to understand whether he's satisfied with the connect that you have built. Being there in that journey of why he came to you understanding that is also very important. Just don't leave them, don't abandon them just because they're asking you a question which does not relate to your service line. I don't think so. Any of the consultants which would be a good consultant will have a recurring businesses if he or she starts to conduct like that.
Okay, and then sort of bring it back down to really where we started. We're coming into much tougher economic times from the information that we see. Clearly, we're picking up on the geopolitical tensions, the Trump tariffs. We don't know where that's going to fall for Thailand at the end of the day. We've seen exports starting to already dip down after a strong first quarter. Tourism hasn't stayed as strong as people would have liked or anticipated here. So we see a tough period coming up. How, Tanva, from your perspective, should our clients be engaging with us now, and how should we be engaging with them? What can we do to help them?
I think in this landscape, a lot of times there are a lot of changes, both on the regulatory landscape, the tax landscape. Anyone following the news would know that we don't know by the end of this month what the tariff rates for Thailand would be. And for businesses, that's very challenging, right? You don't know what effectively your costs are, even if you have a business at the end of the month. So effectively, one is trying to stay ahead and understand what's coming, what's in the pipeline, what you might expect in terms of the legal environment, the regulatory environment, that might change in the future. So as much as possible, you try to anticipate and plan ahead. Now, obviously, we can help with that because we're plugged into this profession and we keep on top of it. Secondly is also in terms of how do you start to prepare yourself, even though there are lots of uncertainties, understanding what are the possible options that you have early on will help you prepare for an event of an emergency, right? Urgency. You would know that, okay, I have option A, B, and C. When you're operating in uncertainty, you don't have the time to start trying to find out what your options are when the troubles occur. Because by the time you start identifying all your options, the situation might change. So you want to have some tools in your piggy bank in terms of these are the likely possible scenarios. If worse comes to worse, I have to retrench my workforce. What will happen? What do I need to prepare for, right? If the regulatory landscape changes to what the government is saying that they may at this time consider, what are my next options? So to prepare those ahead of time. So I think that's what those are some of the matters that we can assist, and businesses should actually actively try to plan ahead for.
Can I also extend that? Because you mentioned before that so businesses may have these constants, sometimes we have these challenges which we're facing now, but I think these days as well there's a sort of a new phenomena, which is this just incredible amount of information which is coming all the time, and it's about the economy. It's also, for example, in my field, about technology. It's overwhelming. I read the other day that the amount of medical knowledge in the world is doubling every 76 days. How can you expect a doctor to consume a billionth of a fraction of that information? It's just ridiculous. You're attached to this sort of faucet of information, and yet you're supposed to run your business at the same time as well. And this is, I would say, sort of a new phenomena, and I think it's not. I think people have to be quite cautious about this as well, because we're in these headwinds, this very turbulent, incredibly turbulent environment, which is somewhat created by this amount of information we have. So, what we really have to do very carefully when we think about technology and how, because you want your business to be able to respond almost. You need your business to be agile as well. You need it to be, going to the gym every day and having its little agile muscles, because we need to adapt, bob, weave, dive, much more quickly than we've ever had before. And this will just keep going. It's not going to go back. In that respect, in a way, we're quite lucky because we actually have some, contemporary technology these days, which we didn't have before, where this is actually a lot more possible and at a relatively low cost as well. But the important thing there is when you've got this sort of faucet of data, is to sort of extract out the wisdom, and then you really need to be, got to find out what is the thing which is going to give you sort of high value, low complexity. That's where you want to find. It's really hard I find it a big challenge for a business. They've got tons of information, but they've got in a way, they have no information. Do you know what I mean? They've got too much data, not enough wisdom. So this is another area where, frankly, it is helpful to have somebody to come in and help, who's outside the tornado, to be able to pick out something and say, this is what you should be focusing on first. This is the reason for it. This is how much you're going to spend. This is how much you're going to get back. And then you don't mind paying, as I said, your $5 if you're going to get $100 back. But I've been in environments where I one particular case where I went to a meeting, a big insurance company, and I knew they were looking at automation software. I said, what automation software did you select? They said, we selected actually Power Automate. I said, why did you choose that? They said, because it's free. And as soon as they said that, I thought, it's going to, first of all, take you 2 years to realize that was a mistake, because that's not the lens. Back to that thing that we should saying before about it's got to be anchored on the business context. You don't mind spending $5 if you're going to get $100 back. But if you didn't ask that question, if you don't know the answer to that question, you cannot possibly, choose down here what you're going to go for. So So in this new world that we're in, where with this phenomena of information, almost overload that we have, it again helps to have somebody who can come in and, look from outside the tornado you're in, because that tornado is spinning faster and faster.
Okay, I'm just slightly conscious of time here. We've been chatting away and there's been lots of good points. And if I could just try and pull out a few of the points in summary. I mean, firstly, Grant Thornton, we're here as a business friend for businesses out there, a sounding board. And I think that certainly from my perspective, when I look at the range of skill sets we have either in-house here in country or through the region or from our global network, we can actually offer an awful lot of broad solutions to clients. And quite often we will have seen a number of these problems and issues before and be able to reference solutions where from a client perspective it might be the first time they've encountered that issue or problem. The sort of second point which I bring out and from the conversation is around culture, tone from the top. I mean, all three of you have talked about how tone from the top is important, setting the standards, setting the drumbeat for the organization. How I behave is how my colleagues will behave. They'll mirror, they'll follow, they'll do the same thing. And so the nasty side of that is if you're not setting your tone from the top correctly, you're encouraging perhaps cliques to build within an organization. You're perhaps opening the door on fraud and other malpractice through the organization, which can either be very much internally or it could also be fraud against the client, which is even less acceptable in many ways. Not that any sort of fraud is acceptable, but I think it's a challenging time. So again, I think we as Grant Thornton can help people talk about tone from the top and how we go about leading our businesses forward. The next point, which I picked up, and I don't think we've emphasized this perhaps enough, is that putting in systems and processes, not only does it support the entrepreneurial stance of an organization and of individuals. And yes, there is a cost, but there is also a benefit to be made from this. But actually, systems and processes don't stifle entrepreneurial activity. They reinforce it. They enable the entrepreneur to go away from the business and branch out into something new, to lead some new activity, knowing that the home base is safe and that people are following a process and system behind it. So I think, again, and another point which I picked up earlier from the conversation, one of you raised the importance of that, I think it was Ashish, about the board and the board acting properly. And the role, perhaps, if we extend that, is that the role of non-executives, how independent non-executives, not put on just because they've got a name or because they've perceived to have contacts or just turn up for board meetings, but a non-exec that can add independent thinking to the way organizations run, the way the board operates, and actually in some ways offer a bit of a challenge to the CEO as to what he's doing in the right way. Not in a negative format, but in a way that generates the best solutions for the business. So I think in sort of closing, one, it's been fascinating talking to my colleagues on this subject so far today. There's a lot going on within Grant Thornton. Key takeaway message for me is Grant Thornton's here as your business partner, your business friend. And one of us or two of us may not have the absolute answer, but chat to us anyway. Share your issues, share your problems, and let us go away and come back to you with ways of perhaps thinking about solutions and finding solutions for those problems. We firmly believe that well-run businesses will be in a strong position to weather the storms and headwinds we're just about to go into with economic uncertainty. Please don't look upon structures and processes as negatives and hindrance and anchors to the past. Actually, they're very much about the foundation of enabling businesses to grow to the next level. They will act as foundation stones for future success. And it's success over a long period as well. And if you're taking a business from startup to IPO, that's what you need. Good internal systems, good strong processes, good communication, good leadership, all the ingredients I know you're very much aware of as an audience but something where we can add some value as Grant Thornton and act as your sounding board and as your independent advisor and your business friend. Thank you for joining us.